Glistening oil, the lifeblood of Phyrexia. Be it pipes or tubules or veins, it flows through every Phyrexian and leaves its imprint on their body, their mind, their very being. In another video I discussed at length and completely dismissed the notion that the glistening oil has any hive mind properties, so for this one I won't be talking what the oil isn't, but instead focus solely on what the oil actually is. A medium for a viral agent. Originating from the plane now known as Old Phyrexia, the oil was initially innocuous and potentially harmless. The plane was a metallic paradise world, with oceans filled with oil and artificial forests brimming with metallic creatures. A near-perfect imitation of life. And just as our oceans have microorganisms living in the water, these oceans of oil had little power stone nanites living inside them. As Yawgmoth bound himself to the plane, renamed it Phyrexia and became its god, his will became Phyrexia's will. Every organism living on the plane was given a new purpose, to evolve, to thrive beyond the confines of Phyrexia, and expand into the rest of the multiverse. And so, with time, the organisms living inside the oil began to change as well, first giving the glistening oil its mutagenic properties, and later evolving into the viral agent that managed to complete the entire plane of Meridian from a single drop. Once exposed to the mixture of oil and nanites, subject's blood is quickly replaced entirely by it, and soon after, it begins to consume organic tissue and will multiply until it overwhelms its host. Once that is done, the subject is ready for completion, which is the replacement of any remaining organic elements with mechanical parts. Again we see that the oil and more specifically the nanites within essentially act like a virus, replicating themselves within the host and using it as a viral vector in order to spread further. Like any other virus, this one also evolves, becoming stronger and more virile, possibly with each successful infection. I reiterate once again because this is very important. The nanite organisms are the Phyrexian virus, and they evolve naturally, just as Yawgmoth himself decreed. There is no proof that anyone else has managed to alter them in any way. The oil, as a medium however, has been upgraded multiple times in order to make it stronger and facilitate the spread of the nanites faster and more successfully. For example, in the short story Phyrexian Autopsy, published alongside Urza's saga, we learn that the Phyrexians, possibly ordered by Yawgmoth himself, have begun mixing sap from a special fire-resistant Yavimaya tree into the oil, thus making some of their Phyrexian negators highly resistant to fire attacks. Later jin-gitaxias mixed the oil with three substances from Meridian. Those are liquid from the Quicksilver Sea, which made the oil corrode living flesh and metal at record speed. Liquefied necrogen gas, which has two properties. First, it is a corrosive necrotizing substance, which saps the life from living flesh and slowly turns the living into Nim, also known as zombies on Meridian. Second, it is also known to affect the brain, heightening any underlying tendencies toward hate, aggression, and greed. And finally, the last reserves of the Blinkmoth serum, which was used by the Vedalken and the Nirok for its intelligence, understanding, and self-awareness enhancing effects. Since it predominantly affects the brain, my theory is that it enables the glistening oil to pass the blood-brain barrier faster and thus corrupt the mind more easily. But these are just the physical aspects, and the oil is so much more. A Phyrexia colored filter. The oil is the nanites, and the nanites, as we discussed, are imprinted with Yawgmoth's will. As such, the oil bears a memory and knowledge of Yawgmoth, his will, his philosophy, the knowledge of the Phyrexian language, and Phyrexia as a whole. By circulating freely within the subject bloodstream, or should I say oil stream, the oil seeps into their very being, thus introducing Yawgmoth's will and Phyrexia's core philosophy to its host. It is important to note that for the most part the oil preserves the subject's personality, and instead adds a layer, or better yet, a filter, between it and the outside world. But doing this, it distorts their original beliefs, in such a way as to better align with the Phyrexian philosophy. Think of it like this. This is you, this is the outside world, and this is the Phyrexian filter. Whatever you perceive will come to you refracted through the Phyrexian filter. Conversely, whatever you project to the outside world will come refracted through it as well. You love your friends and family. Then make them join Phyrexia so you can be together forever. You're interested in collecting knowledge? Well, don't let silly things like morals get in the way of acquiring it. Here are some more in-game examples. Earthai was a former member of the Weatherlight, who was abandoned on Wrath and turned into a Phyrexian. He had a high opinion of himself and was quite arrogant in life, and his completed card from Planeshift shows he retained this trait in its flavor text. Altered by Phyrexian science, corrupted by black mana, and twisted by rage, Earthai still looked in the mirror and saw only glory. Additionally, in Earthai's trickery, we see him reminiscing the past as he makes a sarcastic remark at a captured Gerard.
"Don't worry, Gerard,"
said Earthai.
"I'm sure the crew will come to your rescue as quickly as they came to mine."
This shows that Earthai has retained not only his personality, but also his memories. A more recent example of this are the 5 Praetors of New Phyrexia. Originally, the majority of Phyrexians were black-aligned, because Yawgmoth was the god of Phyrexia, and he was black-aligned as well, and because they were either willing converts who believed in him and his ideas, or because they were Halcyon natives who fled to Phyrexia and were killed and later resurrected as Phyrexian zombies. The Praetors, however, represent all 5 colors. The official law states that they do so because they are affected by the 5 Sons of Mirrodin, but I think that doesn't make much sense, considering how we can clearly see in many different arts that the sky sports multiple suns at the same time, meaning it is not like only one sun shines on you and affects you. It is also not like the black sun only shines on the former Mephidros, for example. It is often forgotten when discussing New Phyrexia that the Phyrexians didn't invade from somewhere else or just sprout from the ground, but gradually corrupt the entire plane and its inhabitants. Thus I believe the Praetors were once inhabitants of Mirrodin, who got completed, and there are some visual similarities that can't be overlooked. For example, shielded humanoid face and eye plates reminds you of the Moriok, or the black-aligned humans of Mirrodin. Elish knows entirely humanoid features of the Auriok, or the white-aligned humans, and Vorinclex, who reminds me of the Fangren. Urobrask reminds me of a Mirren dragon, like Hellkite Igniter, with its still smoldering cut-off wings. Jin-gitaxias generally reminds me of the Phyrexian who offers knowledge in exchange for life, in Yawgmoth's bargain, and as such is the hardest to find comparison on Mirrodin, although his head is quite similar to the old Mirren goblins. A fact I personally find incredibly hilarious. The point I'm trying to make is that I believe the Praetors are not in all 5 colors, solely or specifically because of the suns, but because they are once inhabitants of Mirrodin, each aligned to their respective color, with each retaining it along with their personality after their completion. Regardless of my theory, a fact remains. The Praetors are aligned to all 5 colors, and each have a different personality, upon which the Glistening oil has added a filter, the filter of Phyrexia, thus producing 5 different ideologies, or rather paths, to ultimately fulfill Yawgmoth's will. This brings me to the third aspect of the oil. A carrier for Yawgmoth's will. In my opinion, this is the most important aspect of the Glistening oil, and one that is most misunderstood. As I mentioned in the previous point, the oil carries Yawgmoth's will and the core philosophy of Phyrexia. But what does that mean exactly? What is that filter that all those personalities and color alignments pass through? I present to you the knowledge that is available only to a true Phyrexian. The Phyrexian Scriptures. It is a collection of the flavor text of 6 cards, which basically cite Yawgmoth/Phyrexia's core philosophy and introduce it to every cell of the host that is undergoing phyresis. I will now read each card and place its text on the side for further reference.
From Void evolved Phyrexia, great Yawgmoth, father of machines, saw its perfection. Thus the grand evolution began. Great Yawgmoth moves across the seas of shard and bone and rust. We exalt him in life, in death, and in between. Ash is our air, darkness our flesh. Unskin these impure bodies, great Yawgmoth, that the flesh may welcome your blessings. Father of machines, your filigree gaze carves us, and the scars dance upon our grateful flesh. Let the weak feed on weak, that we may divine the nature of strength.
As you see, these flavor texts contain the basic knowledge of Phyrexia and instill veneration of Yawgmoth. They reference and define perfection and the grand evolution that is achieved through the removal of weak flesh and its replacement with mechanical parts, the survival of the fittest, and Darwinism. I'd like to emphasize that this last bit is indeed closer to Darwinism and not social Darwinism, let alone eugenics, as Wiki states. We have to remember a few things. The original Phyrexians were sick and discarded people, with Yawgmoth being the only person to seemingly care for them. Moreover, Phyrexia was a disintegrating plane and a hellish place, where only the strongest and the most adaptable survived, and this survival was usually done through augmenting the body and replacing the flesh with mechanical parts, and through the, actual survival of either the environment or your boss's punishment for failure. Isn't that right, geeks? Meanwhile, social Darwinism is some nonsense theory that tries to legitimize discrimination in multiple forms, and eugenic basically means forbidding people with sometimes perceived genetical defects to breed, and the thing is, Phyrexians don't breed like humans. In any case, both social Darwinism and eugenics are contemptible, and in my opinion inapplicable to Phyrexia. But I digress. Before we move on to conclusion, I'd like to point one last card. If love is a kick in the head, then having evidence for what I talk about in the last minutes is shot in the gut, gut shot, an instant from new Phyrexia. The rules are inconsequential, the flavor text is what is important. We see a quote from an enforcer of Urabrask saying,
"Down here we have a more pointed version of the scriptures."
This short sentence proves 3 things. The Phyrexian scriptures made their way to Mirrodin/New Phyrexia. Since the glistening oil was the only thing there that came from old Phyrexia, it was exactly that which brought this knowledge and their contents. Last but not least, it is that each praetor projects a different version of the scriptures through the Phyrexian filter. Well, this wraps it up. A complete analysis of what the glistening oil is. To sum it up for the kids in the back, it is a medium for a viral agent comprised of nanites, upon who Yawgmoth imprinted his will in the form of the Phyrexian scriptures. The nanites in turn overlay it as a filter on the personality of the host, and the joyous pursuit of perfection can begin. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did writing and recording it. Cheers!